potions and supplies, but you need a place to track your stuff, cause you're so disorganized. You click open the web page, you heard about a critical role, and now you're ready to kick some butt in that mine shaft full of no's. It's D&D, D&D Beyond, yeah, D&D, D&D Beyond. You got your stats, you got your swords, and you got your invisible wall. It's D&D, D&D Beyond.
Hello, everyone. This is Todd Talks, and I am joined with a fantastic panel. We will be discussing problem spells, or spells that are broken, or spells that aren't broken but are just in general a nightmare for players and DMs. I am joined by Jen Kretchmer, Lauren Urban, and of course Jim Davis. So first off, what axe do we have to grind right away in terms of spells?
Oh no! Just jump right into it.
Let's just get it. Maybe we should just get into Wish.
Yeah, let's just knock it
Yeah.
out.
Let's just get it out of the way. Sure, yeah.
The elephant that you wished into the room.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's
so-
now a completely different color.
And
yeah, you're not going to get the elephant you wanted. It's going to actually be a dragon named elephant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Don't tempt
Yeah.
me.
Great
Don't tempt
dragons.
me.
Oh no,
So,
too late. I gotta think about my own game too, right? Eventually, my players are gonna have Wish, and
Yeah. So
That's
Wish is an
true.
interesting spell because it is, I would argue, especially now in 5th edition, adversarially written in Tome. So, like, if anything's not 8th level spell or below, the guidance literally is things are going to the more that you deviate from these set lists of things that Wish can do, the more bad things happen or things you didn't want to happen. One of the classic examples is you wished a villain was dead. Well, you move 100 years into the future where they've died of old age. Real game breaking kind of stuff, or I mean, if you're down for that, your campaign jumping around in time, then it's fun. But yeah. So yeah, how do we feel about Wish? And it's so hard for both players and dungeon masters to navigate because it's almost like character death in that sense of sometimes characters have to die to kind of prove the like bad things happen in the game and like set that kind of limitation within D&D that there is a bridge too far. And I think Wish is very much an embodiment of that. It almost is character death in a way of that same fear factor. Like, oh, something really bad can happen. Like, this is super bad.
So
Yeah.
I start by coming at Wish from, I started playing with 2nd edition. And so in 2nd edition, Wish had a very distinct purpose. And Todd, you and I have talked about this before, which in 2nd edition, Wish basically existed to fight creatures that there were no other way to defeat. So Wish existed for the Tarrasque. You needed a bunch of wishes to get that taken care of and dealt with. And it was going to come back anyway, but for the time being, it could be taken care of. So that was what Wish's function was in the older editions. Now Wish has sort of taken on a more creative tone, which I think in general is what the wizard is a fantastically creative, imaginative class, which is why I love playing them. But I think what you've said about it potentially being an area that becomes adversarial between DM and player is the great danger of Wish. I would disagree with you that it's written to deliberately be adversarial. I think it's written to have the option for the DM to take it that way if they so choose, and to basically say, no, you are, that is a bridge too far. But it also may not go that way. It does have the odds of success. It doesn't say DM try and break your player's wish.
Right.
It does say that the larger the wish, the larger the consequences, which I think
Exactly.
is back to the idea of magic balancing itself and the weave always trying to repair itself.
And the consequences is what I mean when I say adversarial. Like, I don't mean like your wish is always going to be wrong. But yeah, certainly like the broader the wish or the more powerful the wish, the greater those consequences are going to be flashing back at you.
Yeah, and I think adversarial can be a really loaded term, especially in a game where so often people see the DM as there to foil the plans of the players in a negative way, that it's players versus DM instead of collaborative. So I think that's an interesting place to sort of start for sure.
So Lauren, how do you feel about Wish? You also have had recent experience.
Just a little. So I'll preface this by saying I don't mean this in a bad way, considering the way Wish came up for me in Heroes of the Veil. I threw it at you. You didn't throw it at me. But Wish is one of those spells, and there are a lot of them, and where as a DM, as soon as my players have access to it, we have a chat. Because I feel like...
Yeah, absolutely.
For a bunch of the reasons that have already been talked about, but also because like I think every DM is going to have an idea of how they're going to, are they going to be the DM that's going to try to twist and turn things? I'm the kind of DM that I'm going to take your wish and it's going to come true, but I'm going to make it come true in the most hilarious way possible, and so it's not necessarily going to be bad news, but it's going to be crazy. And so I feel like if you're going to drop a 9th level spell, if you're going to get the deck of many things, that it's worth having the discussion of, hey, you have the ability to do this. And so you now innately know how this could play out, to kind of give a heads up to my players. Now, Heroes of the Veil, as I said, we didn't get that discussion because I threw Wish at you. You didn't throw it at me. But that sometimes happens. That oftentimes happens, and where here we go, unintended consequences. If you're gonna roll on a magic table, or if you're gonna just pull a random item out, it can happen.
You don't want Wish spell to not be worth it, and that's the super big danger. And in Heroes of the Veil, particularly with Lindra, I think that what was such a rare case study was 20th level character. before her time,
out of the blue,
literally
surprise
living in a
20th level character.
He's surprise level 20 character living in a box. So like in a way, a lot of her magic is wholly theoretical, right? Like hasn't had the life experience to actually like use these spells because she's literally trapped in a box. And so I think that actually would make a lot of the spells a little bit more dangerous. But you're right, like you don't want Wish spell to suck. What's the point? Like I am excited for Wish. Every wizard wants Wish.
Normally when I cast Wish in a campaign where we've played to a level where we have access to Wish, you're running it by lawyers, you're going through it, writing it for weeks and trying to think of every permutation and going through every monkey's paw scenario you can think of with how it can be twisted before you put it out there. So it's to have to like try and make the decisions on the fly was a really interesting experience, but an incredibly stressful experience, which then, ties perfectly to the consequences of casting the spell.
And that's why you didn't take necrotic damage. You already had taken real life necrotic damage for it.
Real life psychic damage.
Here's the amazing part about that, because that you had that experience with Wish, like the history of Wish, and having to be very rules lawyer about it. Whereas I'm the type of DM that's like, all right, let's just see what happens. And I'm not as interested in the specificity of all of the words and the like, okay, what's the intent? And then I'm just gonna have fun with it. I think that's why. Of many reasons why I was just like, all right, here we go. I'm going to wish. There it is. And
that was your character too. Yeah. That was very much your character.
It was, I certainly, if I was playing a much more intelligence-based character, or if we had more time, I would have thought about it a little bit more, but I don't think much more. And I think that's the beauty and the danger of this spell, and I think all the other spells that we're going to talk about, is they allow for so much latitude that they also allow for so many interpretations.
Jim, how are you feeling about Wish?
I feel a lot of very conflicted things about it. I think as written, I would never use it to not just duplicate a spell effect, because that 33% chance of never being able to cast it again is enough for me to go like, none of these have like only one object of 2,500 gold pieces. Like, come on, like I can't even create a whole pile of gemstones that I need, like just the one, you know, like I find like
really again that comes back to like kind of adversarial as a spell. It's like
I
I'm
see
going
it
to
as
punish you for
very
using
limited.
this spell. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm tempted to pull up the 3rd edition SRD and compare the two for that, because over the editions of D&D, the wish has gotten more and more limited in what it can do, even though they've removed limited wish from the game. Like,
Right.
and as like, sure, replicate any spell of 8th level or lower. That is a powerful ability, and anyone who would want to get their hands on it, you know, probably should. But like, I would either try to interpret something that they said with the wish through an existing spell. Like, just find a way, like, okay, what is it you're trying to do? And that just comes from, you just have to be a nerd and know what the D&D spells do, you know, in order to kind of pull that off. Or I kind of go with Lauren's take now, where in my early DMing years, the only time anyone ever used a wish was to get back at another player. And so it was always I'll tell you one of the worst ones was I had a player, we were at Deck of Many Things. He drew a wish. Another player had gotten a bunch of magic items. The entire campaign had been running solo missions with me because they were a thief and wanted to steal things. And I was like, hey, you want to play D&D 101? Fine, let's do it. And the other player was jealous. And so they were like, I'm going to wish that all of so-and-so's magic items are gone. And wrote it out on a handwritten, this like on a legal pad. This whole thing took like an hour to write it up, was talking to other players. I read it and I was like, there's nothing in here that says all of your magic items are gone. And like, that's just because the kind of DM I was at the time. We were all adversarial in that manner. And it resulted in a whole, like, they tried to destroy the Deck of Many Things. The goddess who created it came down and was like, no, you can't do that. And instead of just talking to each other like adults, because we were children, that was kind of like the last time I ever really got to a wish, until I played with like friends who were adults. And then it was like, oh, I wish for a bridge to cross this chasm, or I wish for a thing, just like whatever they need right now. They're just going to wish for the most convenient thing, and they don't try to like word it in a way to gain an advantage. They're just like, I want this thing to happen, and then I just go, okay, and it's silly and weird and stupid, and add something goofy to the game or something like that, or I'll let them tell me like, how does it, what does it look like when you wish for this thing? Like, what the wish is supposed to do. How would you rule it?
Oh, yeah. You should always let players, describe, I think, the effect that something has when you can. Like, and combat as well, because I'm continuously surprised. Like, why not have, more cores to your CPU making the story better?
It's kind of how I just say divine intervention, which is similar to wish, except even more vague.
Oh God! Divine intervention is a nightmare.
And I'll tell you, don't ever let anybody think that it's never going to come up in your campaign, because I've had to deal with 6 divine interventions in 5th edition. 6 times clerics have rolled under their level on a D percentile and gotten it off. So yeah, it'll come up.
And it's always when they're at a super low level too, when you're never expecting
it's usually
that
like 10th or
happen.
11th level. It's like way sooner than when you want it to happen. You just have to roll with it.
Yeah, divine intervention.
I went and actually.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I went and looked up the original versions of Wish, and in 3rd edition, Wish was a 3-sentence spell description.
Yeah. There's some. I remember there being like some examples of something, but you could raise your stats with it. Maybe I can't remember.
Yeah, it was. You could alter the past, present, or future to cause a wish to come true. You may wish to erase an unfortunate adventure, for instance, or may get a clue to a powerful item or great treasure. Wishes must be careful. The referee may grant a wish in such a way as to kill or handicap a character. That's it. That's the entirety of it.
That's the entire thing.
Days with the referee.
Right, the referee. There might have been a commentary in the DMG. There might have been a commentary in the DMG, but maybe that's it. Yeah. Back when the spell descriptions used to be divided between PHB and DMG, so you get like all the info. They'd keep some spell info from players. So I don't know. Like, when do y'all ever give out wishes, like, purposefully? Because I like to give out a wish early on, like one for the party. You guys get like a wish, and I use it. It's almost always comes in handy, and it makes me feel better about putting like death traps into my dungeons, because if they've got a wish, then you could have gotten out of that sand filling room with the 2-ton door that slams down. Like, that's kind of how I look at it. As like it's a fun tool that they can change the world with or save their hides.
I obviously am a fan of I am a fan of mixing up D&D. I've used Wish a lot. I've run lots of games where Wish has come into play. For Here's the Veil, we are kind of almost like the campaign that's trying to break itself in a way, because low level characters are really pulling like a Frodo and Sam Gamgee kind of thing, where they're like, okay, we are way out of like our swim lane, but that's what this adventure is. And so it's very terrifying that like Orkira got a wish spell, and like she didn't know she was going to get it, and when she cast it, she asked for time travel, which is in the world of D&D so problematic. Even in like novels,
in the world, it's problematic.
Yeah, I love it.
In all fiction ever problematic. So she almost like bound her entire party to a wish spell that had to be completed. So in a lot of ways, well, I mean, basically in all the ways, Alinda is a victim of wish, because Alinda was the only one smart enough to fix a broken time machine, and it took her like millennia to fix. And because she's the only one that also could survive growing old and trying to repair it and going back in time. But yeah, when you ask to go back and like when you go ask something huge, like to change the events of time or the adventure, that's when things really, I think, kind of break apart for Wish. I think simplistic phrasing on Wish can be a little bit easier. Like you feel like, I wish this person was alive and this person was dead instead. That's almost like a trade. Like that's almost like you making a deal with the universe. And I find that as a DM, I will almost always allow that. Even if it's a villain, I'll be like, well, but your morality is probably compromised a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like you've just traded a soul for a soul. So
I mean, particularly if like, I was to say, do y'all have anything like world building around Wish? Do y'all have any like gods that govern its use, or like planers or anything like planar creatures that enforce its laws or anything?
I do.
Yeah, I think it depends on the campaign.
We've got two of the players in the room.
Oh, I see. Yes, don't play your hand.
Todd, please tell me more about the gods that govern your wish.
I will say
I'm completely taking out my headphones.
Yeah, I will say that anytime you cast a wish spell, you get attention, and it's not wanted. Sure.
Yes,
no.
It is. It's very much like I would say. You're letting the universe know that you are ready for a higher form of chicanery. And that means you're going to attract angels, devils, or even a pseudo-organization devoted to preventing this sort of thing from happening.
Yeah.
So there are
Men in Black Faerun edition.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, when you really think about like, how do the gods feel about this sort of thing? And it's a good question. Like, how do the gods feel about Wish? Because not all gods, I think, could use Wish. Otherwise, it would be a nightmare for the universe. And I think gods in particular, if anyone is familiar with Dragonlance, not big fans of 20th level wizards. So, spoiler alert.
Well, I mean, that used to be demigod. You used to be a demigod at 20th, and so that scale, I mean, in my head, that still is what that looks like. Is you are rolling around the base of Olympus at that point, and that's a dangerous place to be.
It's a stressful spell.
Yeah, we actually have a question from the chat that moves to a different spell, but it is kind of very. Yeah, well, a lot of what we're talking about.
It could be a campaign series, a panel that we just talk about Wish every day.
I mean, we joked when the first Wish came up in our game that like this is going to be the rest of the show is us just talking about Wish. But so M Bridal asked for a spell like planar ally that requires a player to bargain with an extra planar being in exchange for aid. What sort of bargains have you offered or made to players as DMs? So this is kind of a similar thing. It's like wish with a charisma component, essentially. You summon someone else who can wish, and you're trying to bargain with them. Hey, do the thing I want to do.
Yeah. I usually now, in so far, every time that I have dealt with planar beings bargaining, they were always fiends. They were either like vampire necromancers who were like, listen, demon, I'm going to summon you. And as soon as you get here, I'm going to break the circle. You can do whatever you want. I just need a disorder that you're going to cause. And so in that sense, it was like two chaotic evil beings who were like doing each other a favor, like this weird moment of togetherness and cooperation. And so it was an easy enough negotiation. In my Land Between Two Rivers game, they recently passed through a settlement that had been subjugated by a devil's army. And while they were there, the players were like, oh, they all wanted imps. And so I was like, a year of service in the blood war will get you an imp. And they don't care who fills it. It just has to be somebody. And so that was that kind of thing. I just play it up. I just try to think of whatever a sleazy lawyer would do. Then that's kind of the position I go for. But like, if you're summoning a celestial, then I don't know, like ask it to, go walk around, go walk as far as the spell will last and heal everyone they come across or something like that. Like that's kind of a fair trade or something.
I think the benefit of that is making that choice is like, okay, well, a fiend will grant you any wish, right? Like a devil will like give you any wish you want. Lawful good celestial, not gonna give you everything you want, but it's gonna probably go right. Like so,
yes.
I think
and you still have to pay it.
Yeah. I think I think a lot in terms of good omens, and sort of what the two of them would ask for in exchange for their help, and so often you would think of a celestial kind of saying, everywhere you go, you've got to do this nice task for someone, this helpful task, which ultimately may or may not end up helping that place or person. But you've made this agreement that you're going to do this for this aid. Whereas if a fiend would probably ask for something similar in a different way. I like the idea of that bargains can be ongoing. That I'll give you help now, but you've got to continue to do this thing. And if you don't do that, we're going to have another conversation at a later date. There's going to be a performance review type situation. And then we'll reevaluate how this went and see if we need to renegotiate what happened here, especially with creatures that can't necessarily be trusted. So
and it's such good character building and it's such good role playing. They're great role-playing spells, and that's the funny thing about like some of the most difficult spells that we've just mentioned are like the best role-playing spells. As infuriating as they may be for everyone concerned, sometimes they are actually like they define your character super fast. Like I would argue, like Jen recently had a conversation with a fiend, and she did not compromise. Like the easy route, easily would have been to say, "Yep, let's do it." But it was against her character. And it was like horrifying because, it was horrifying in a good way because you're just feeling that weight of like, I'm literally going to hand you the keys to the castle, make your life so much easier. And having to stand up against that is like a character defining moment. Like that's a movie moment. And that was like so well done.
It occurs to me that using your characters, the personality traits that they get from their background is a great way to approach these bargains. Because, tell me a devil isn't going to know what your flaw is, or that a celestial isn't going to try to play to your better nature through your bonds or through your ideals. And that maybe is a way, if you're as a DM and you're like, gosh, what can I offer this player? Something that's thematic to the creature and plays to their character that they're interested in. That's where I would start, I think, is trying to do that. Devil's going to try to corrupt you, not overt evil, make you compromise your ideals, your morals, that kind of thing. A demon is just going to be like, overt and destructive and angry and sort of like, violent. Whereas a chaotic good celestial might put you in a moral bind where you're like having to break the law to do something good, and maybe that's a difficult thing for your character to have to deal with, like them being criminal for for the right reasons. So
yeah, this is where alignment comes in too, I think. And as much as people have real issues with alignment, I actually happen to love alignment. I think it really creates incredible moments to help steer characters and their interactions with the world. So I'm a big fan of alignment, even though there's been a lot of pushback on it recently. I think it's a very valuable tool in this stuff.
I think it used to be overly done alignment. We used to be like super like lethal. Paladins had to be lawful good. They screw up, they're done. It was a little too regimented, and now I'm like, it's a really strong guideline, and I think it helps focus everyone's backstory and character. And also to that point, like you were talking about, like what a character brings to like the planar aspect of like having that conversation with the devil. I kind of think maybe you should keep wish if there are consequences also based on that character. So like, or Kira's worst nightmare would be probably watching all of her friends die, especially as a healer and a cleric and someone who lost their faith and could do nothing about it. Those are the worst.
Why are we talking about this? You're not bringing this up for any specific reason, are you? No, I agree, because like, no,
it's just
there's no reason to talk about that. No, 100% agree.
Bring your characters either flaws or their fears into consequences, I think is like a really good handle on that. Now, let's think of another spell that is a nightmare. Suggestion.
We just put in the chat.
Yeah, so that's the thing. When you brought this up, I was just like, we're going to talk about charm spells. We're going to talk about all the charm spells.
Sure,
so hard.
Do you want to start a suggestion?
Yeah, let's talk about suggestion.
Yeah, I mean,
so mean.
So here's the problem with any of the charm suggestion, anything in where you get to dominate any of those type of spells in combat. You have a pretty race in my.
One second. Lauren's having a little connection issue. She'll be right back.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah. It looks like she's back.
Am I back?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. I was just about to go on a whole rant about charm, and apparently that can't happen.
They're
trying to keep you down.
Someone dominated my router. I don't know what's going on.
I disagree. I disagree with Lauren's take on charm. Please take her out of the game. Yeah.
And gone. No,
and muted.
Out of combat, it can be super problematic. And if you've got someone who's willing to go down bad roads, and the only saving grace in my opinion is that most of the time once the spell ends, the creature knows that it's been charmed and can act appropriately depending on what you did. But it's it's a role-playing nightmare if you're not careful.
Also an ethical quandary when you do it to a player.
No, that's why. That's what I mean. Yeah.
It's so I mean,
it's one of those that you have to talk about, right? Like it's part of a session 0. It's part of like where are the boundaries of this campaign? How are we going to use enchantment magic? Is it like, is it a villainous only thing? And I will give you guys a clear out of character forewarning. This person controls minds. That will be a threat. Some people, I've had players where I didn't realize it was a big issue for them, for their characters to be charmed. And to me, it's like, oh, vampire does it, or a mind flayer or something. It's part and parcel of D&D to temporarily
do it too, and it's not necessarily an adversarial thing. It can be a charm can be a self-protective mechanism, like a camouflage. So I think for me in my games, I generally as a rule in session 0s, unless I'm playing with extremely experienced players who I really trust, have a no PvP rule. So you're not going to be using it on any of your compatriots. And, because if you're doing that, then you have to start talking about what classes are permitted in terms of, doppelganger, changelings and things like that too. But in general, with charm scenarios, I've had it backfire on me where I've had players who won't play along if they're up against an enemy who is charming them. They'll be signaling it to the rest of the party, not with in character behavior, but with very overt wink, wink, nudge, nudge. This is not normal. And that's challenging. And so I take that into account too when I'm building encounters with groups often. But
you definitely learn a lot about the player, right? Because like I've charmed characters and they've been all in. Like they were ecstatic to be charmed. Yeah, exactly. But some people just won't play along. They'll be like, "No, I guess I'm just gonna sort of be charmed" or something like that.
But it stinks to have to take out an entire school of magic from a game just to completely withdraw that as a possibility. That takes out a seventh of the magic in the world. And it's a shame to lose that because there's such fantastic storytelling capability in those spells and in those creatures.
You gotta really be story focused and not, like you said, not a PvP. And I don't see like another player casting charm on another player as necessarily being PvP if everyone's buying into that's how this kind of world is. And like a few minutes later, you're like, oh, I'm gonna kill him. Like I'm gonna pants in. It's like in a low-key kind of charming, kind of way, but not in a dark, sadistic way. That can make the table super adversarial.
Oh, we all know people like that in our real lives where when you're with them, you're like, oh, how charming and what nice you are. And then you get away from it. Like, I don't want to do this. Why am I?
No, and that's why what Jen said about like having those discussions and being very upfront, especially about any type of PvP, is super important because like if you're going to have players who are going to have that kind of adversarial relationship, they need to all be in on that. Everyone needs to give the okay. Yep, we're going to be the team that argues and fights and doesn't always get along, but does the thing anyway. Because all it takes is one person who's like, well, no, I kind of want to be the A team. I don't want to be the squabbling team. And then it
I'm
just
not
feels
cool
bad.
with this guy always picking my pocket every time I get something cool and I'm excited to have this new item, and then someone comes along and in my sleep takes it out of my pocket. That's a I'm a big fan.
That becomes a bad video game.
Not fun.
Why haven't we killed this guy?
Some people love that. Like, it's knowing your group and knowing your players, and I think often that's with these spells that become a question. That is the key to it: is know your group, know your players, and have a conversation about it.
100%.
That's often very the heart of most of this. What about how do y'all feel about like suggestion in general? Because it lasts the 8 hours thing is like what gets for a second level spell. That's a long time, like, to me.
It's a very powerful second level spell, and mass suggestion is a nightmare.
No concentration too, right?
I don't think so.
It's a weird spell not to be concentration.
I think the reasonable part, like in any course of action that sounds reasonable, is the rub, because it's like it's so open to interpretation. The players is almost always, of course, my thing's reasonable, and DMs,
See, I view it definitely from the perspective of reasonable, from the perspective of the charmed creature.
Right, it's the targets. Yes,
I always approach it from whether it would seem reasonable to the target, not to the caster. It's if you can give me a solid justification for why I should do this thing, okay, sure, why not?
And that's where it can be great. That's where it becomes almost the illusionist, and like your creativity needs to be the thing, like your knowledge of like how people work, maybe, or the NPC works mentally. Then that becomes super fun. Like you have to like really become inventive. Like, okay, I can't just off them, but I can convince them maybe to go into this room where they don't know a dragon is, or something like that. You need to like kind of be that illusionist, coming up with like really ingenious ideas. And this goes back to the wizard having to really be one of the most creative classes up there. Well, now with artificer as well, and in different ways that you really have to. It's a thinking class, and it'll give you a headache.
Or you go with bards, and where they get all those same kind of powers, and now it can be everything from being manipulative and being possibly a little chaotic or evil, all the way to I'm gonna get people to do the right thing, even if it's the wrong way of going about it. The force of personality, which in a weird way almost makes more sense when you're trying to suggest someone do something, and then you're gonna cast the spell, and now you're just gonna be super charming and convincing about. Hey,
You're
why
just
don't
gonna
you
make that
just go
little
walk?
tiny pull in the sweater and just start picking at it.
Yep.
Which
Yeah.
that all came out of Dark Sun Bards, which everybody knows I love Dark Sun. That's my jam.
Well,
So to
the College of Whispers bard is the one that goes dark fast.
Yeah,
It's really
like
it's really cool.
Oh, it's a great subclass. But wow, if you want to have a creepy campaign, that is the one.
I like a sorcerer using suggestion if they have subtle spell, because then they've just got they've got the, whatever their focus or components are. You don't know what's happening. Reading the spell, it doesn't look like the target knows anything has happened. It's not like charm or friends, where if they even if they pass or fail, they just complete the activity to the best of their ability.
It's true.
I've had it used on big boss fights with the big bosses, the lieutenant, and it's just the suggestion is just walk away. Just put down your weapons and walk away. And that's as effective as a banishment if they fail, right? That NPC is still in the game, but for that fight, it's as long as that concentration's kept up, it keeps them out. So it's pretty powerful, but
you could you could destroy an entire world. You could suggest Gollum drop the ring in the fire.
But that to me would not be a reasonable course of activity, because
Gollum wouldn't do it. Yeah, Gollum would never do that. But
no reason that they would.
But you could tell somebody else too, who wasn't in the thrall of a magical item or something like that. They could be okay, I'm just gonna drop this then. Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. Gollum would never, no amount of magic would ever make Gollum do that.
And as much as the 8 hours makes it super powerful, I think the vagueness of the wording of the spell, and where the creature gets to basically determine their own course of action in completing this task or this activity, gives you the leeway of changing how they're doing things. If I tell you to go walk for 8 hours, and you come across a river, or you come across a hazard, or something happens in your life in those 8 hours that, I need to go over there. You can change how it works over those 8 hours. And, so as a DM, you get a little bit of leeway there, but it can still be interesting.
It's also to allow for the span of something like don't wake them up in the morning as their alarm. And that's not something you can do in a minute. You've got to give the time for the action to be completed. So
that's a very good point.
I think you need the time, unfortunately, to make it work. But yeah, it depending on how you play it and how creative your players are, it can be a dangerous one. But also, it's as frustrating as it can be
a long rest.
Yeah. As frustrating as it can be as a DM when your players outmaneuver you, I think there's also something to rewarding that creativity. And
I would. I think you have a bad DM if they don't like you outwitting them. I love things to go wrong.
That's gonna happen. If you're a DM and you're I never want to be outwitted, then it's then you got to play with dum-dums, and
or
I don't want to mean, but it's gonna happen.
And then you're not playing D&D, you're just telling a
Uno.
story.
Yes,
Yeah.
There's more of them.
I have more of a problem with players who are out crunching me than I do with players who are outthinking me in terms of creativity. It's if you're pulling off a build off of a website and just laying that down, and you're thinking 7 levels ahead without ever being present in what's happening in the game and what's actually happening to your character, and you're just going for a purely math build, that I have a lot more problems with than someone who comes up with some really creative way to just nerf and neutralize an entire arc in one spell.
Exactly.
Yeah, chaos is a good thing, and if I honestly think a dungeon master, nothing is better than my plans being foiled. I love it, which is probably why I put so many game-breaking things into Heroes of the Veil, because I want to see things just go to complete shit. Like there was a moment like Alindra could have like in the game, she could time travel to any location, gone to any location in the D&D multiverse at any time, and that would have been the campaign, because I gave the players the choice, and it is no longer a game if I don't let them fulfill that choice. And if you give people a time machine, you gotta let them do their thing. Like, you have to be prepared to like, okay, well, now we're playing Spelljammer, or now we're in this completely other universe. That's
It
the
wouldn't
most
have been
fun.
fun for me to make that decision without ever consulting anybody else on it, though. You know,
Well,
there's a bunch of other people at that table, and I wouldn't feel right about making that choice for the whole group on that front.
I think everyone at our table would be game for just about anything.
Yeah.
You mentioned
But I
bringing a
appreciate
character
the
back to
thought.
life. Yeah, that's a good. I mean, yeah, that's a very positive way to be about it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, don't wish everyone to be in Dark Sun if they don't want to play a Dark Sun campaign.
No, that's yeah, especially if you're a halfling. Do we want to talk about maybe a less powered spell for a second? Because I have a question
Minor
about
Illusion. Oh my god.
Well,
it's a
love
great
we were
spell.
we got a question in the chat that actually brings up something we were talking about just before we began. Eldmir asks, healing word, the most powerful spell in the game, yay or nay?
Not the most powerful one, but powerful for its level.
Yeah, it's damn useful. At ranged, bring somebody back from 0 to fighting into fighting shape, and you can still smack somebody around or cast a cantrip. Like, it's a great first level spell. Like, I don't mind it at all.
In
It doesn't give
comparison to the
enough
fact that so
healing.
many subclasses have zombie mechanics, which is like, you get hit with such and such damage. If you go down to 0, then you wake up instantly and have 1 hit point. This is something we've seen in a couple of subclasses now, and that just zombie mechanics your entire party and then some. It is pretty powerful for a first level spell, but of course you don't want everyone to die in your game either. But yeah, it's
It's also not doing a ton of HP. You're not getting like dozens and dozens of HP back. I mean, at level 1, you're getting less. You're getting a single digit, and you're still in danger. So,
and it's also where it happens in initiative too. That's going to affect it.
Very conditional initiative.
And very rarely, you know, unless you're talking about more experienced players, I've also very rarely seen it used for that purpose. Strangely enough. To bring somebody
I always
back.
get talked about online and griped about. Like, I've never seen it in person.
Yeah, I never see it in play, in practice, but in theory, yes, but in practice.
Because no one at the time is upset when it happens. Because when I'm casting healing word and bringing someone back up, I'm not upset because I've just saved someone's butt. The person I've saved is not upset because their butt has been saved. And in most cases, the DM is not upset because they don't actually want to kill any players. They want there to be like an epic fight. So in practice, everyone's happy.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think we're equipped to judge healing word. I think villains should be the ones to chime in on like like actual villains. Like, how does Tiamat feel about this?
When she's using healing word,
weapons do you want me to not care about healing word?
No one in the universe is going to speak out against healing word.
Until your bad guys are using healing word. Until your bad guys start healing each other, and then all of a sudden your player's like, wait, what? But that's just funny.
I would not do that to my players. Why would you make combat so much longer?
It's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Anyway,
exactly.
I agree with Warren. I think it's a problem that arises after the fact when DMs look at their encounter and they were like, "Oh, it should have been like this, or should have been that, or it's been so many times since the characters died, or such and so," and they just have this idea of character death as being some kind of benchmark for something, and then they go and complain about it, and it's like I think that's what's happening.
Well, while we're on healing, do we want to take on healing spirit? Do we want to go down that rabbit hole?
Oh dear. Yeah. Do we want to get crunchy in healing spirit? I don't know.
Okay, should we pull up James's article first?
Let's just put up Joey's article.
His article.
Go see Joey's article. Joey, James Hake has a Great article about this problematic spell. I will say I have
Jeremy
only made a
Crawford has
crunchy
talked about it.
at length. I know some people were wondering about twin spell. I actually find twin spell to be very literal in the sense that, you know, if it's hitting more than one target, it ceases to function. So I feel like that's kind of a clear and cut case. I will say I have, and Jen mentioned this, crunchy characters. I did make one. The only one reason I made Eberron super crunchy is because that's who Eberron is. He's always trying to get a leg up. And he manipulated things by having being able to see in the dark, even in magical darkness, casting darkness, or oh my god, why am I forgetting the spell? I cast this so much. Where you have duplicates.
A mirror image or
image.
Oh,
huh? Yeah.
Mirror
So
image.
like Eberron would either cast darkness or mirror image, and he had the sentinel feat, which is super evil. So I can cast darkness, and then I have advantage on all my attacks if I want. And if you try to leave the darkness, I automatically get a reaction to attack you. And that reaction, that attack, if it's successful, which is already an advantage, makes your movement speed 0. You are stuck in the darkness and you cannot get out. And it even works on thieves. The other thing with having multiple versions of you, illusions of yourself, is you roll a dice to see if they actually hit you. And if they hit one of them, it again triggers the sentinel feat. And you get another reaction attack. You know,
I feel like the key to what Jen was saying about crunchy characters, though, is not the because I've done it before too, especially in 4th edition.
I
Like
have
coming
too.
up with that perfect build of stuff is awesome. The key is that if that's what you're going for, if that's what makes you happy as a player, is the combat focus and the crunchy character and the planning everything out. That's great. Just tell me as a DM and tell the rest of the players, and then work along with the role playing
group that's built to be combat for that, because the scenario that I've gotten where the only time I've ever had to ask someone to respec a character was I had one hardcore min-maxer who took Ghostwise Halfling with crossbow expert and something else, and it just was a nightmare of doing way more damage off the top, and nobody else could get a hit in. So if I challenged them, the rest of the players never would get through the combat. There was no way, and it was so off balance as a group. So it's making sure that the rest of the group is on the same page with that.
Or the player also understanding, like, it gets old if you're doing it every time, and the DM will find a way around whatever sneaky stuff you're doing. Like if you're constantly spamming darkness, if you're constantly creating illusions, if you're just using the same trick over and over again, the villains are going to know you're using that trick. So
and villains talk.
Villains talk. Villains will talk.
Especially for a character like a warlock, where your slots in any given fight are, you've only got a handful. If that darkness gets dispelled or countered, then what are you going to do?
There's your trick.
There's your trick. And it's not very party friendly, right? Like unless you have other people who can see in the darkness, or you've got Skulker or something like that, then like if you put it on a target and then the target's in darkness, you can see it and attack, nobody else can, and then nobody else can stand around you if you're, so it's I tried a similar thing, not before Hexblade. It's a lot of fun.
That's actually, and I removed it from my character right before we started our first session. I was like, well, what am I going to do? Just hang out in the darkness all the time, every time we're in a fight? Like this doesn't make, I mean, I would do it. My wife and I have planned to play a game. The next game we get to play together where I'm not DMing. We would love to do like a Shadow Monk or, Shadow Sorcerer and a Warlock that can see in the dark, and just be like that weird tag team WWE kind of like, just like we are the darkness goth couple, that's kind of fun.
That's
and I'll say, like, even if you've got a player who wants to be the crunchy tanky, go into combat and kick down doors and do everything, filled with a bunch of other players who just want to do the role playing, once again, if everyone talks to each other and if everyone is very well aware, oh yeah, this person is all about the combat and these people are about the RP, and so it's okay if my friend over here is super min-maxed killing stuff because he's going to carry us through the combat, and then he's going to tag along and go through and let us do the RP that we enjoy. You can have that kind of balance. You can totally have both min-maxers and role players getting along, playing together, cats and dogs, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But that's, once again, you got to talk to it. I've had that happen in my home games before, where like, all right, these people are going to enjoy today a little more than the other people, but we're all going to get along because it's going to, we're going to get through the combat for the fight for the RP people, and you got to talk. You just got to talk.
Yes.
Well, and another thing is, as you're playing, you get to know your friends. Like, I mean, like Heroes of the Veil, a lot of us knew each other, but we weren't like super close. And every honestly, every adventure we get closer. Like, we talk more about this stuff, but sometimes you're just not going to know until you cross that path what works and what doesn't. And that's the hard part. Like, it's hard to have a session 0 that covers like everything that may happen or ever happen. And you will forget. Like, there are things I don't dig in games that I forget until someone does it to me. Like, if someone treats me like I'm a super poor kid that's a piece of trash, that's not going to make me very happy to play the game. like I didn't even know that was a trigger for me until someone did it to me in a game. I'm like, okay, this is not fun. I've lived this. Like, don't make like live something that is unfun already. But what is there any other spells? There's so many.
Animate Dead. We've got a lot of spells, but someone else.
There are more spells than we can get. Yeah.
We'll have a part 2. We should totally have part 2 of this talk.
Yes, we should.
Another Blaze in chat just asked, would you guys talk a little about Animate Dead? So
I'm happy to. Yeah. What about it?
I love necromancers. I love Animate Dead. The fact that you now lose control over them bothers me and makes it a super ethical dilemma. Being a necromancer, I don't know that it's overpowered.
I think it's like, this is a world building problem, and like, clearly Animate Dead, there might be dozens of versions of it in your world. Like, there might be some that creates a malevolent evil spirit type undead, like is here, because it's like you're summoning a skeleton and a zombie and they're neutral evil in the monster realm. But you might have some that just summons a corpse automaton, and it's just stands there when it's not being controlled. And so I would say it's like, if it's from a world building perspective, then like just change the spell. And the question I have for you guys is, do you guys, if you have a necromancer and like one of their zombies or skeletons gets murked, do you let them reanimate the skeleton and zombie? Or do you say like, no, the spell says it has to be a humanoid, not an undead that gets animated? Like, I'm curious how y'all do that, or if it's ever come up.
It hasn't come up for me, but now I got to think about this.
I do take in like battle damage, like just spamming it over and over again. Like, I kind of feel like if it's a skeleton, it's been crushed, it's done, it no longer can function. So I kind of, but that also paints the necromancer into kind of a corner as well, because finding fresh bodies. I mean, also, if you're a necromancer, by the way, and you're listening, mold earth, it saves a lot of time unburying bodies or burying them. So, but yeah, it's hard.
And it's,
if that's their big party trick,
digging trenches. Sorry.
How to be a necromancer while winning friends and influencing people.
Which is find other necromancers, because that's a hard party to be in. That's the interesting thing. Like, I don't have any problems with the spell. I don't have any problems with necromancers wanting to have their fun, but that's a game. That's also a game I would be very cautious about joining personally, because I don't know if that's the kind of game I'd want to play. But I can totally see, people going into that going like, we're going to raise undead armies.
Yeah. The way I could see this working is if you had a character who is specifically flavored, and this is to create a completely different type of necromancer, but where they carry around like the ancestral bones of their family with them, and they raise their family to fight for them and defend the family line. That's the kind of thing where I think I would allow them to continuously reanimate the same bones. Other than that, I think once it's happened, it's burned. Generally, if you're coming across a corpse, I don't think it's something you can just endlessly spam.
But that's good flavor, and that's bringing something to the game. And I think that's a fantastic example. I think it's always fascinating to try to play a good necromancer, and you're probably going to go evil eventually. but like starting out with good intentions. I think that's
Yeah.
Well,
always interesting.
I think that also becomes a partnership with your DM. If you've got a necromancer in your party and that's what they're going to be doing, that's their thing, and you're going to rule that they can't reanimate the same corpse over and over again, well then I as a DM, I've now committed myself to making sure this person has fresh corpses, because then it's just not fun for them, you know. I need to make sure that the barbarian has a weapon and the ranger has a bow and the necromancer has a body. That's my job.
Yeah.
Particularly if they go and like buy armor for their skeletons and they upgrade them and name them.
I do kind of love that. That like that's why I'm like, I'm all for you like upgrading your skeletons, putting armor on them. I think that's charming. Something about like you losing control of them bothers me, because like that can really hurt your player as a necromancer. Like if you've cast Animate Dead and you are well intentioned, and then like a few hours later you just ran out of spell slots and you don't have time to like keep control, and that skeleton wanders into a village and kills a bunch of people. I don't like playing that character anymore.
But that's
Like,
conjure elemental too. I mean, it's the same. You lose control. You bring that much magic. Again, it's coming back to the idea of things will balance themselves. You use that much power to bring something that should not be under your control. Sometimes there's a chance it's going to go badly. And
that's true. It just scares me.
Not
like
a great
someone
outcome,
dying because of it worries me.
I think if that was like the way the spell worked, you didn't have like a version that didn't do that, you'd probably just like pretty much just have to like destroy it whenever, if you knew you weren't going to be able to renew it, right? Like, or shove it in a cave or have it just walk into a corner for eternity like it's playing Morrowind or something.
I had a horrible
that's the kind
character.
of thing where your
I
players
had a horrible
know.
necromancer who literally just kept on casting Raised Dead and just shoving them in a locked cavern for the right time. So hundreds and hundreds of undead over like the campaign, and like just waiting for like eventually.
All the level ones go.
Eventually, I'm going to run into a villain. I'm going to convince them to open this door.
I'll say one last thing about like reanimating the same body. If the necromancer player is like, I'm going to take tools like sewing kit, or like if they're going to be like, these are like, I patch them up, I mend these bones, I make a splint or fuse metal to it, or I don't know, something like that.
Doctor. Necromancer as a doctor.
Necromancer as a doctor is what
Frankenstein is super fascinating.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that put clothing and name them and personality. Your zombie. Those are the necromancers that are almost. Those are the ones that get fun.
Yes. Well, this was we could have talked way longer than this. This was a fantastic conversation. We will, for those watching at home, we will totally do this again. There's so much more to dig into, and we have such strong emotions about all these spells. It's quite lovely. So yeah, Todd Talks is moving to a little bit more of a panel format. And when I say panel, I mean like if you were at a convention and you wanted to see something discussed, that's what Todd Talks is kind of moving towards, is having more guests on and having different opinions about different things, and just getting that, like, you don't have to wait in line to get into this convention or worry about the horrible seats you have or the hot dog that you shouldn't have eaten the day before. So yeah, that's the idea for Todd Talks. So thank you everyone, my guests, Jen Kretchmer, Lauren Urban, Jim Davis. Be sure to check out WebDM. Be sure to, because everyone knows who WebDM is, but just fantastic advice, big deep dives into all things D&D. Lauren Urban is a fantastic community manager at D&D Beyond, the community manager, but the community manager of all our hearts. And Jen Kretchmer, of course, on Heroes of the Veil, and just playing an amazing character, by the way. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope everyone had a good time.
Bye.
Bye.